Some stories are whispered through time. Stories of bravery, faith, and destiny. But among them, one story shines with unusual power. The story of a young woman who rose from obscurity, who stood before a king, and who risked everything to save her people. This is the breathtaking story of Esther, a story of courage where death was near, danger was real, and faith was all she had left. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful biblical documentaries like this one. Now, let's step back nearly 2,500 years to the Golden Empire of Persia.
Our story begins in the reign of King Xerxes, known in the Bible as Ahasuerus. He ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen, from India to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. He was powerful, wealthy, unchallenged. To display his glory, Xerxes hosted a festival lasting 180 days, a half year of drinking, feasting, and boasting of Persian supremacy. Guests from all nations gathered. Nobles, generals, governors. Every corner of the empire was represented. And when those 6 months ended, Xerxes held one more feast, a 7-day banquet for everyone in the capital city of Susa. Wine flowed freely. Music filled the halls. Every cup, plate, and curtain shimmered with gold. Meanwhile, Queen Vashti held a banquet for the women. But on the 7th day, everything changed. Filled with wine and pride, Xerxes ordered Vashti be brought before the crowd to display her beauty like a trophy. But Vashti refused. A simple word, but in a kingdom built on absolute obedience, that no shook the palace foundations. The king felt humiliated. His officials feared rebellion. And so, Vashti was removed. The throne stood empty, and the search for a new queen began.
In the same city lived a young Jewish girl named Hadassah, known by her Persian name, Esther. She was beautiful, yes, but more importantly, she was kind, gentle, wise. Esther had lost both parents when she was young. Her cousin Mordecai took her in and raised her like his own daughter. Life was quiet, simple, hidden. Until suddenly, the king's officials swept through the land, gathering the most beautiful young women for the royal contest. Esther did not volunteer. She did not desire the crown, but she was taken to the palace with dozens of other women. Inside the palace, she underwent 12 months of beauty preparation, 6 months with oils, 6 months with perfumes. But it wasn't the treatments that made her stand out. It was her humility, her gentleness, her wisdom. The women of the palace liked her. The staff respected her. Even the eunuch in charge favored her above all the others. When her moment came to meet the king, she brought nothing extra, only what she was advised to bring. And when Xerxes saw her, he was moved, captivated. He placed a crown on her head, and Esther became queen of Persia, the most powerful woman in the empire. But she carried one secret. She was a Jew. Mordecai instructed her, "Do not reveal your identity. Not yet." Esther obeyed. Her hidden identity would soon become the key to salvation.
While Esther settled into the rhythms of palace life, Mordecai remained in Susa, the bustling capital of Persia, where merchants shouted prices, soldiers patrolled the streets, and rumors floated like dust in the wind. Every day, Mordecai walked to the palace gates, not because he belonged there. He was still just a common man, but because this was the closest he could get to Esther. He would stand in the shadows of the gate's massive stone pillars, blending in with travelers and servants passing by. From there, he listened carefully, hoping for any hint of how Esther was doing inside the palace walls. Some days, he overheard palace workers carrying linens or jars of wine, whispering about the new queen, how gentle she was, how respectfully she treated the staff, how differently she carried herself from the nobles. Each time, Mordecai's heart warmed. He had raised her from childhood, and although she now sat among royalty, he prayed she would never lose her humility. But one afternoon, as the sun began to set and the heat of the day softened, Mordecai lingered near the gate longer than usual. 2 palace guards, stationed at the entryway, stepped aside to speak in low, urgent voices. They assumed no one was paying attention. But Mordecai listened. Their words froze him. They were angry, furious at King Xerxes. They complained that their service was undervalued, their sacrifices ignored. And then their whispers darkened. "We should end him," one muttered. "The king will not see another sunrise," the other added. A plot, an assassination attempt, right under the palace walls. Mordecai's pulse quickened. He knew he could not stay silent. He hurried away from the gate, weaving through crowds, searching desperately for someone who could deliver a message to Esther. When he finally found a palace servant he trusted, he relayed everything, every detail, every whispered word of the conspiracy. "Take this to Queen Esther. Tell her it's from Mordecai." The servant nodded and disappeared behind the towering palace doors. Inside, Esther received the message and immediately understood the danger. Without hesitation, she went to the king and reported the plot, not claiming credit for herself, but naming Mordecai as the one who had uncovered it. Xerxes ordered an investigation at once. The guards were questioned, their weapons were searched, their private quarters examined. The allegations proved true. The conspirators were arrested and executed, their plans silenced forever. The king's life had been saved, but the hero remained unrecognized. The event was recorded carefully in the royal chronicles, written in ink, sealed, and stored among the king's most important documents. But Mordecai received no honor, no reward, no recognition. Not yet. What seemed like a forgotten act was actually a seed planted for a future moment that would change everything.
Then enters Haman, a man whose name would soon be spoken with fear across the empire. Haman was not just an official. He was the king's favorite, the highest noble, a man who wore wealth like armor and pride like a crown. He walked through the palace with a swagger that made servants look away. His robes shimmered with threads of gold. His voice carried authority. His temper dangerous and unpredictable. The king elevated him above all the princes and nobles, and with that promotion came a command. Everyone must bow when Haman passes by. In Persia, bowing wasn't just respect, it was submission. It was declaring someone above you. And so the people obeyed. Merchants, soldiers, servants, nobles. Every time Haman walked through the palace courts, the crowd sank to their knees like falling leaves. Everyone, except Mordecai. Day after day, Haman approached the gate with his entourage of guards and attendants. The sea of people bent low, heads touched the ground, silence filled the air. But Mordecai remained standing, straight,
unmoved, eyes forward. Not once, not twice, every single day. At first, Haman didn't notice. He was too consumed with himself. But eventually, one morning, as he passed through the gate, he caught sight of a single figure refusing to bow. A spark of irritation flickered in his eyes. "Who is that man?" Haman asked sharply. "That is Mordecai," a guard whispered, "a Jew." The moment Haman heard Jew, hatred ignited in his heart. How dare this man challenge him? How dare he stand when all others bowed? To Haman, Mordecai's posture was rebellion, an insult he could not tolerate. But Haman was not content with punishing just one man. No, his pride demanded something greater, something terrifying. He summoned his advisors. They whispered about Mordecai's people, a people with different customs, a people who worshipped only one God, a people who would not serve a human as a deity. As Haman listened, his hatred grew into obsession. He didn't want Mordecai's apology. He didn't want a simple punishment. He wanted Mordecai's entire people wiped off the map. A genocide, a complete erasure. So Haman devised a plan, a dark and carefully crafted scheme. He approached King Xerxes with words dipped in poison. He began, "There is a certain people scattered throughout your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their laws are different from yours. They do not obey your commands. It is not in the king's interest to let them live." Notice, Haman never said Jews. He hid the truth beneath vague language, manipulating the king with fear and flattery. Xerxes, distracted by affairs of state and trusting Haman without question, made a decision that would shake the empire. He slipped off his signet ring, the very symbol of ultimate authority, and handed it to Haman. "Do as you see fit." With that ring, Haman had royal power, power to write a decree sealed with the king's authority, a decree no one could reverse. Haman wasted no time. He called for scribes. He ordered them to write a proclamation in every language of the empire, to every province, to every city. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews, men, women, and children, shall be destroyed, killed, and eliminated. Not just the men, not just the leaders, everyone. The decree was stamped with the king's seal and sent on horseback to every corner of the empire. Like wildfire, the message spread. In Jewish homes, mothers clutched their children, fathers stared at the scrolls in horror, sons and daughters wept in the streets. In the markets of Susa, merchants stopped trading. In the homes of the faithful, fear hung in the air like smoke. The entire city buzzed with confusion. Some whispered, "Why would the king do this?" Others asked, "What have the Jews done?" But no one dared question Haman directly. Across the capital, sorrow grew like a storm cloud. And when Mordecai saw the proclamation, he tore his clothes, a sign of deep anguish, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went into the city, crying with a loud and bitter wail. He no longer cared who saw him, no longer cared about appearances. The fate of his people was sealed. He stopped at the palace gate because no one wearing sackcloth could enter. And there he stood, broken, grieving, desperate. Death had been scheduled, a date had been written, a nation had been condemned. But Mordecai knew this was not the end. This was the beginning of a battle that would change everything.
Esther soon heard unsettling news. Whispers reached her chamber. Mordecai was at the palace gate, crying, dressed in sackcloth, covered in ashes. This wasn't normal grief. This was the kind of mourning reserved for tragedies that shake nations. Confused and worried, Esther immediately sent a messenger to find out what had happened. But when the messenger returned, his face was pale. "Queen Esther, Mordecai refuses the clothing you sent. He will not stop mourning." Esther felt her stomach tighten. Mordecai never acted without reason. Something terrible was unfolding. So she sent another trusted servant, Hathach, commanding him to go directly to Mordecai and bring back the truth. When Hathach reached the palace gate, he found Mordecai sitting on the ground, surrounded by others who were weeping. His clothes were ripped, his face streaked with tears and dust. In silence, Mordecai handed Hathach a copy of the decree. A decree stamped with the king's seal. A decree written with Haman's venom. A decree that scheduled the destruction of every Jew across the empire. When Hathach returned and placed the scroll in Esther's hands, she slowly unrolled it. Her hands trembled as she read each word. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. This wasn't just a threat. This wasn't just danger. This was a death sentence for her people and for her. Then came Mordecai's message, sharp, urgent, honest. "Do not think that because you live in the palace, you alone will escape. Do not think your crown will protect you." Esther froze. She knew Mordecai was right. He continued, "If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from somewhere else, but you and your father's house will perish." The words hit hard. They were not spoken with anger, but with the painful truth of someone who loved her too much to lie. Then came the sentence that would echo through history. "Who knows if you were made queen for such a time as this?" Esther's heart pounded. She looked around her room, the perfumes, the golden walls, the luxurious garments, the servants waiting silently. None of it felt comforting anymore. It all felt heavy. She remembered her past, an orphan, raised in secret, taken into a palace she never asked for, crowned queen before she even understood why. Could this, all of this, have been leading to this single moment? Esther walked to the window overlooking the courtyard. Her reflection stared back at her, a queen wearing royal robes. But inside, she was still Esther, still the girl Mordecai had raised. She knew the law. Anyone who approached the king unsummoned could be executed immediately. It didn't matter if they were a servant or a queen. And the king had not called her for 30 days. 30 days of silence, 30 days of uncertainty. One step in the wrong moment, and she would die. But if she stayed silent, her people would die. She sank to the floor, wrestling with fear, with destiny, with the weight of a nation on her shoulders. After what felt like hours of trembling silence, she finally breathed deeply. A steady calm settled over her, not the absence of fear, but courage rising in spite of it. She called Hathach once more. "Take this message to Mordecai," she said, standing tall. "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa. Fast for me, 3 days and 3 nights. No food, no water." Her voice shook, but her eyes were resolute. "My maids and I will do the same." She paused, her chest tightening, knowing what she would say next would change everything. "After the fast, I will go to the king.
even though it is against the law. If I perish, I perish." Those words became more than a declaration. They became a transformation. In that moment, the shy, quiet, hidden orphan girl faded away, and a courageous queen rose to take her place, prepared to stand before a king, prepared to face death, prepared to save her people.
3 days passed. With trembling hands, Esther put on her royal robes. She walked through the palace halls, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The guards watched in alarm. No one approached the king uninvited. Inside, Xerxes sat on his throne. When he saw her, silence, tension thickened the air. Then he extended his golden scepter. She lived. "My queen," he said gently, "what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be yours." But Esther didn't rush. "My king, if it pleases you, come to a banquet I have prepared for you and for Haman." Xerxes agreed. Haman felt honored, proud beyond measure. At the banquet, the king asked again, "What is your request?" But Esther remained patient. "Come tomorrow to a second banquet," she said. She was setting the perfect moment. Haman left that night overflowing with pride, until he saw Mordecai again, still refusing to bow. Enraged, he built a massive gallows 75 feet tall, planning to hang Mordecai the next morning. But God had another plan. 3 days passed. With trembling hands, Esther put on her royal robes. She walked through the palace halls, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The guards watched in alarm. No one approached the king uninvited. Inside, Xerxes sat on his throne. When he saw her, silence, tension thickened the air. Then he extended his golden scepter. She lived. "My queen," he said gently, "what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be yours." But Esther didn't rush. "My king, if it pleases you, come to a banquet I have prepared for you and for Haman." Xerxes agreed. Haman felt honored, proud beyond measure. At the banquet, the king asked again, "What is your request?" But Esther remained patient. "Come tomorrow to a second banquet," she said. She was setting the perfect moment. Haman left that night overflowing with pride, until he saw Mordecai again, still refusing to bow. Enraged, he built a massive gallows 75 feet tall, planning to hang Mordecai the next morning. But God had another plan.
That night, a strange restlessness fell over the palace. The lamps flickered, the moonlight slid across the marble floors, and in the royal bedroom, King Xerxes lay awake, eyes open, shifting on his pillow. No matter how he turned, peace would not come. His mind wandered through the affairs of the empire, the countless voices of advisors, the noise of court politics, and yet something unknown kept pulling him awake. Finally, frustrated, he sat up. "Bring me the Book of the Chronicles," he ordered. His attendants bowed and hurried to fetch it, a massive record filled with the history of his reign, written carefully by scribes over the years. A servant opened the heavy scrolls and began to read softly. Names, battles, trade agreements, new laws, old events. Xerxes listened absently until the servant reached a particular entry. It told of a man named Mordecai, a Jew, a commoner,
a man who had uncovered a plot by two palace guards who planned to assassinate the king. The servant continued reading. Mordecai warned the palace. The plot was confirmed. The traitors were executed. The king's life was preserved. Xerxes slowly straightened in his bed. He frowned. Wait, he said, raising a hand. Has anything been done to honor this man? The servant looked confused. He flipped through the pages. Nothing. No, my lord, he finally said. Nothing has been recorded.
Xerxes stared into the distance, shocked. A man had saved his life, yet had received no reward, no recognition, no honor? It cannot remain so, the king said. We must honor him at once. Just then, footsteps echoed down the hallway. A familiar voice approached, one laced with pride and venom and ambition. Haman. He had come early, far earlier than usual, with a private agenda. His plan? To request the king's permission to execute Mordecai. But before Haman could speak, Xerxes called out, Haman, perfect timing. I need your counsel. Haman smiled, certain this would be good news. Yes, my king, anything you desire. Xerxes leaned forward thoughtfully. Tell me, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman's heart leapt. Of course, who else could the king possibly mean? Who else did the king delight in more than him? In his imagination, he already saw himself wearing royal robes, riding the king's horse, the entire city cheering for him. So Haman replied with all the extravagance his ego could imagine. My king, give him your royal robes, robes you yourself have worn. Give him your royal horse, one with the crest of the kingdom on its head. Place a noble prince before him, and let the prince lead him through the city, shouting, This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Xerxes smiled, a real satisfied, decisive smile. Haman, he said, rising to his feet, your idea is excellent. Haman's chest swelled with pride. Then Xerxes continued, Go at once. Take the robe, take the horse, and do everything you have said. For Mordecai the Jew. The word slammed into Haman like a blow to the chest. His smile died, his breath caught. Mordecai? Mordecai the Jew? He whispered. Yes, the king nodded firmly. The one who sits at the palace gate. Do not neglect a single detail. Haman's soul collapsed inside him. The humiliation was suffocating. He had come to ask permission to hang Mordecai, and instead he was being ordered to honor him. Moments later, Haman walked through the streets holding the royal horse, his hands trembling with rage. And behind him, Mordecai, dressed in the king's robe, mounted on the king's horse, unaware that heaven itself had just begun turning the story around. Haman's voice cracked as he was forced to shout, This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. People watched in awe. Some laughed, some whispered, some stared in shock. But everyone knew one thing. Haman, once the proudest man in Persia, was being crushed under the weight of his own arrogance. Hatred boiled inside him. Humiliation burned hotter than fire. But his downfall, his true downfall, had only just begun.
But the danger wasn't over. Persian laws could not be canceled. The decree to kill the Jews still stood. So Esther fell at the king's feet, weeping for her people. Xerxes extended the scepter again. He allowed Mordecai and Esther to write a new decree.
On the appointed day, the Jews could defend themselves. When that day arrived, God gave them strength. Their enemies were defeated. Their lives were spared. Mordecai was promoted to the highest royal position, and the Jews celebrated the great victory. The festival of Purim was established, a celebration that continues to this day, all because one woman found the courage to stand up and speak at the right moment.